This is Jason from LPMC Information Security. In this podcast, we're going to talk about the return on investment, or ROI, for SIEM, also known as Security, Information, and Event Management. Specifically, we're going to talk about 3 different value points that we want to make sure that you're aware of and that hopefully you're getting if you've already got a SIEM solution in place, or things that you want to consider if you're evaluating SIEM solutions. Now, before we jump right into the ROI, I want to make sure that everybody's got a foundational understanding of the technology that we're talking about. So SIEM, and that's how we pronounce it here, SIM, almost as if the E is silent, is at its source a log monitoring technology. And really the business goal or the objective of this control that we're talking about is to get all of the different log files that exist on systems across the enterprise that need to be monitored into one single location, so centralize the log messages, and then we can perform some computations on them to identify things that are of interest from a security standpoint. So let's jump right in and start talking about some of those return on investment value points that I mentioned. The first one that we're going to talk about is what I'm going to call the worst case scenario.
So what I mean by the worst case scenario is this. When the bad guys do get into your network and they start moving around in the ways that they normally do during a compromise, you want to be able to detect that activity so that you can respond quickly. It's fairly straightforward. Now, the reason we want this value point is there are a lot of reports out there that tell us if the bad guys do get in, it's a long time before most organizations detect that. And what I mean by a long time is normally on the order of somewhere between 3 to 6 months, seems to be the average over the last few years. Now the SIEM should be able to detect that movement from machine to machine and the compromise of systems and escalation of privileges that we typically see in those type of account compromise. And that's why we call this the worst case scenario. So yes, a SIEM should give you visibility into that. However, one of the things that you have to also understand is unless you have a really poor, from a security standpoint, network, that activity should not be happening all the time. One of the common things that I see when I'm talking to clients, either folks that are evaluating a SIEM, maybe going through a proof of concept, or they've just recently installed one and they're trying to determine if they're getting the value that they expect out of it, is they'll be looking for indications of that worst case scenario and be frustrated that they're not seeing it. And the conversation oftentimes goes something like this. I'll ask how the SIEM is performing for them, and the client or the prospect will say something along the lines of, I've read all the product literature. This thing claims to do some awesome things in terms of alerting and reporting. However, I don't know if we just have a quiet network or what, but we're not seeing a whole lot of interesting things coming out of it. And believe it or not, that's actually what you hope for. Now, the way to overcome that, and I think where a lot of vendors miss the boat when they're showing and demonstrating a SIEM to some of their prospective customers, is this. While you don't want that worst case scenario to be actively happening all the time, because that would indicate that you have a whole lot of other problems that need to be addressed, you do want to validate that this control, the SIEM or the log monitoring, is working properly. The best way to do that is to simulate some of that attack activity, the things the bad guys would be doing, so you can get validation that the SIEM is catching it and reporting and alerting on it properly. A great way to do that, if you've got a penetration testing team, either an internal team that does that function for you on a periodic basis, or if you contract with an outside vendor to provide that service, it would be great to have them, explain to them what you're trying to accomplish, and then ask them if they can run that type of a simulation for you. Now, if you don't want to pay to have that done, or if you can't do it on an almost free basis, you might talk to the SIEM vendor that's providing the service that you're evaluating and ask them, what are some recommendations on how to generate some traffic that would show us that this thing is doing what it's supposed to do. And quite frankly, it's pretty easy to do that sort of thing. So the vendor should be able to help you out without much difficulty. And if you're talking to them and they're reluctant to help you with that, might be an indication you need to evaluate other vendors too. Now, to hammer home how important this worst case scenario value point it really is why most companies are trying to buy SIEM technology and implement it these days. I heard a great analogy. I was speaking at a banking group in Texas a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about this very topic. And one of the gentlemen in the audience, raised his hand, and he mentioned that he thinks of it like experiencing a bank robbery and then finding out after the fact that the video system, the surveillance cameras, weren't working. And it's the same thing with SIEM. This is what we see a lot of times in incident response type engagements, where we're going in to help figure out what happened and recover the client's networks back to normal business operations. Oftentimes you'll go in there and find out that logging wasn't enabled or it wasn't configured properly to get all the information needed to figure out how the bad guys got in and verify that you've gotten them out of everything they got access to. The SIEM will do that. It provides that log trail that the forensic investigations teams needs to be able to connect the dots and put the pieces together. So having it really does help in those worst case scenarios. You just need to make sure that you're testing it to make sure that you're getting the maximum value out of the system. The next value point we're going to talk about is audit and reporting. So many organizations have some type of an information security compliance obligation. Maybe for healthcare, there's HIPAA. If you accept credit cards, you've got to deal with the PCI standards. There's a lot of either laws or industry regulations that you have to worry about. And almost all of them, all these compliance obligations contain some requirement for log monitoring. Normally it's to aggregate the logs to a central location, and then there's a review or analysis of the logs and make sure that people are responding properly to the data that's presented, to the alerts. And in addition to the alerts that are being reviewed, and just that core competency of reviewing the logs and getting them all in one central location, there's a lot of value to be gained by helping with the reporting for some of the other security controls that are required by your compliance regulations. A great example of this is perhaps you have to review user access or access from privileged accounts, maybe a systems administrator or a domain administrator account. The reporting that comes out of the SIEM can provide a quick view, and you can do this on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever basis makes sense for you and your organization. But you can actually have the SIEM generate reports of, say, any account that's added to the Windows Domain Administrators group. So you can see that on a periodic basis. You can actually, if you wanted to, you can have it generate an alert, or you can do some batch reporting where that data is presented to you on a daily or weekly basis. You can keep that data then, maybe it's in PDF or email form in a central location. You can show that you've reviewed it, and when the auditors come to call asking for evidence this has been done, you can provide them that proof that one, the report's been generated, two, maybe it's delivered to somebody that's assigned to conduct the daily review, and then you've got a record of everything that's happened there. So it can be a huge help for things like user access reviews. Some of the common things that we see that organizations want that compliance reporting for are, as I mentioned, privileged user groups, maybe user accounts that are added or removed from those groups, use of privileged administrator accounts, accounts that are locked out, accounts that are re-enabled, account creation. There's a whole lot of these. Some of them are explicitly required by the compliance regulations. Some are just organizational best practice based on your security needs. But know that audit and reporting can be a huge help. Some other things that might be of interest that you could look at too. You can look at network flows. If you're getting that information from your network infrastructure, you can take a look at the top protocols that are in use going in and out of your network. You can take a look at the IP addresses or host names that are moving the most data in and out. And you can give that a quick sanity check just to make sure that it makes sense for your organization. Once you're starting to look at all these kind of things, it will actually help you build alerts, things that the SIEM is proactively alerting you to too, so that you can respond more quickly. Because what you're doing is determining what's normal for your network, and you can start working out ways to identify anomalies too. So that's audit and reporting. It's not overly complex. You just want to make sure, since you have this awesome tool that's collecting all this data from across the organization, that you're actually getting the audit and reporting out of it. On the reporting specific side, you might take a look at some of the executive reporting that most of these tools are capable of generating. That can be a great data set that you can provide up to your more senior management to show them some of the value that the organization's getting out of the tool. Now, the next value point we're going to talk about is research and troubleshooting. Now, for my money, this is a very important one, and it's one that sometimes gets utilized and leveraged in organizations and sometimes not. I would say it's about a 50-50 split from my own personal experience. So again, we've got this log data coming from all kinds of systems from all across the organization. And we'll actually have another session on what types of logs you should be monitoring. But for now, let's say we're getting most of everything from across the organization. So we've got all this great data. And now in the technology world, we're always going to have operational problems. That's just the nature of our profession. And one of the things that the SIEM can help with is to quickly or more quickly diagnose some of those operational technology issues to help us get to root cause so we can correct the problem and get our business operations back to where they need to be. This can be true in the case of networking problems, especially if you're collecting data from firewalls, routers, and switches, and you're getting that net flow data too. All of those can help you quickly do queries and diagnose an operational problem. It's also true for applications. If maybe you've got a problem with your web server and the backend database that supports it, or an application server, and you're getting logs from all those different applications, you can help connect the dots and put the pieces back together a little bit more quickly. And then operating system and workstation logs too. Those are great sources where all of this data together in one central location can really give you excellent visibility into what's going on in the midst of an operational problem. So don't discount the ability to get in there, run some manual queries, and be able to get to the root cause of a technical problem more quickly than you could otherwise. That's actually a common value point I see in larger organizations that do typically struggle with technology problems on a day-to-day basis. Usually there's a lot of break fix going on. And if you can take something where, for a given problem, it normally takes an hour to diagnose root cause and go to all the systems and figure out what's going on, if you can get that down to 30 or 20 or 15 minutes, then that's a huge cost savings. You're freeing up people's time to focus on more valuable tasks. Now, the key here is to take the time to learn the SIEM's query structure and the query language if it's got its own, so that you know how to perform this research and troubleshooting before you actually run into a problem. So most vendors will offer either some type of a documentation or training. Just make sure you take the time to take a look at that and understand how it works. And I believe that you're going to find out you can provide a ton of value to your colleagues that are working on IT operational problems, and you can help demonstrate the return on investment for the log monitoring, which has up until now been seen as a security technology. So take the time, figure out how to do that research and troubleshooting. Not only are you going to find some interesting things about how your networking systems are working, you're probably going to be able to get to problem resolution more quickly than you would have otherwise. So now that we've covered all three of the SIEM value points that provide the return on investment you would expect, let's take a minute to unpack that and just summarize it quickly. So the first one we talked about was the worst case scenario. And this is when the bad guys are broken in and you really want to detect them quickly so that you can get them out of your organization. The key takeaway that you're going to want to be aware of here is making sure that you've got a reasonable expectation that that type of activity isn't happening all the time, but that you are doing some type of testing to validate that the technology, the SIEM, is going to catch it when it does happen. So work with your penetration testing team or vendor to make sure that they're simulating that activity for you periodically and that you can validate that the control is working properly. The next one is audit and reporting, making sure that you're getting all of the reporting and all of the validation that you need to meet your compliance obligations. The SIEM can be a huge help with this and reduce a lot of the administrative burden you might have to perform otherwise. And then the last one is the research and troubleshooting. This is where you can invest a little bit of time and effort to learn how to use the SIEM's query or search function. And you can help out the IT operational teams, maybe even your security team, in getting to root cause analysis on some IT operational things a lot more quickly than you might be able to otherwise. So don't discount that. Again, worst case scenario, audit and reporting, research and troubleshooting. If you get those 3 value points out of your SIM, you're probably outperforming the rest of your peer group. If you're evaluating SIM technologies and trying to find the right fit for your organization, I encourage you to take a look at LBMC Information Security's Managed SIM service. It's a great way to get up and operational on this type of a service very, very quickly. We can have you up and running oftentimes in less than 30 days and providing value back to the organization. We've been delivering managed security services to our clients for over 15 years now, and we've got a very mature operations center that provides that service 24/7, 365. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can give us a call at 844-526-2732 or visit us on the web at lbmcinformationsecurity.com. Thanks and have a great day.